Reboot your computer. I hope this video was helpful to you in installing the drivers on your computer. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe for more videos. Thanks for watching.
Hello everyone, my name is Matthias. So last weekend I had a conversation with a buddy of mine and we were pretty much discussing setting up a server at home. So using it as an NAS or running a few services like cloud storage or hosting a website. The only issue this person was facing at the moment was that they didn't really know where to start. So they had a bit of information, they had a bit of knowledge about the hardware side, how to set everything up, but they didn't really know how to get started, how to make these things work with each other. So that was a bit of a block for them to get actually started with this. So I thought to myself, well, why not make a quick mini course about this? Because I think many people at the moment rely on big tech companies when it comes to their data, personal files, and of course other services. And I'm not really a big fan of that. So I don't really like third parties. I don't want to rely on any of them actually. If I can, I would like to host these things myself and have full control over it. So I pretty much recommend any tech-savvy individual to have a look at home labbing. So what is home labbing? Well, as I mentioned, pretty much a server for your home. Of course, the topic itself is a bit wider than that, but for now I'm just going to have a look at just running a server at home. Now when people think about servers, they often imagine like a huge supercomputer or a server rack filled with multiple devices. But the truth, of course, is that you can pretty much start with something as little as a Raspberry Pi or an old laptop. Now for this mini course, I am going to use a general desktop tower computer as an example. The reason being, well, it is a lot more flexible than just running things on Raspberry Pis or an old laptop, of course. Okay, so before we get started, a small disclaimer, of course. I am just an enthusiast, so please don't quote me too much if I make any obvious mistakes or I say something wrong, of course. I haven't really made too much notes. I've made this presentation, that's about it. But after these 3 slides, we will just get right into it and set everything up. My main aim pretty much is to explain this to the general public, so to everyone. That's maybe also why I might omit some information about things just to keep everyone on track and, well, so that everyone actually understand. If I use too many different terms that people don't understand, well, I don't think that that will be useful for the general public. Okay, so what are we going to look at? Well, first of all, the desktop hardware that we're going to use. Things that I recommend, so if you don't already have a device or you're still shopping for something, we'll have a look at the hardware that I recommend. Then what software we're going to use, so the operating system. As you can see from the logos, maybe you already know these. We are going to use Proxmox and TrueNAS primarily. And then also we're going to have a quick look at the services that we can run. So these are services that I recommend that you use. You of course don't need to, but for the general public these are already pretty useful. So let's get started with the hardware then. There we go. So for hardware, well, if you don't already have a device and you're still shopping, have a look at the processor that you're going to use. If you are planning on running multiple services at the same time, so let's say a gaming computer, an instance of like your own cloud storage, a website, and maybe other things as well, you might need a few cores to actually run these things. Reason being, well, we are going to use an operating system called Proxmox, which creates virtual machines. So that means that we are able to create multiple computers within our one server or our one computer itself. And because these computers also need like specific processor. You need to actually provision specific cores to these multiple virtual computers. And the more you have, the better, of course, because the more processor cores you have, the more virtual machines we can create. Another thing is the RAM, so the work memory. Again, the more you have, the better. With the processor cores, we can actually over-provision what we have. So that means that if, let's say, I have a processor with 8 cores, and I have 2 virtual machines, I can give each virtual machine, let's say, 4 cores. If I then have I need an extra virtual machine, I can give it more than these 8 cores that exist. So we can use specific cores for pretty much used all my RAM. And if you're then going to over provision, that is only going to cause issues. So that's something that you need to keep in mind, that you still have enough RAM for that. Then for the RAM itself, if you're going to go shopping for that, well, one thing to maybe keep in mind, and maybe something that is very useful, is ECC RAM, so error correction code RAM. Reason being, well, they can actually fix issues when accessing files. So let's say you have a lot of photos that are very important to you, or documents that are very important to you. If you are going to access these files often, they will be loaded into RAM to actually use it. But whilst it is in RAM, there can be some issues, so corruption or a bit flip. So these things don't often happen, like I think once a year or so is the general consensus. And often you don't even notice that these errors occur. But of course, over the years, this can add up. And we don't really want to lose any data, so that's where ECC RAM comes in. They can actually detect these errors and they can fix it. Of course, not every motherboard supports ECC RAM, so if you're going to purchase a motherboard, check that it supports it. You will also need to enable this. No, I'm not sure. I don't think you need to enable this within the BIOS, but it might be possible for some manufacturers. But do check that they are compatible, of course. If your motherboard is not compatible, your ECC RAM will be just normal RAM, so you've spent maybe more money for the same stick as non-ECC RAM. Now, which type do you need to purchase? Because when you're going to look for these sticks, there are specific categories for them. And there are 2 types that are often used. One is unbuffered RAM and the other is registered. Now, if you're just going to purchase like consumer hardware, often it is the unbuffered RAM that you need to purchase. If you are going to actually purchase like enterprise hardware, like a supermicro computer or anything from the servers from Dell or something, they pretty much all, I believe, only support registered RAM. So that's something to keep in mind and have a look at. Now, an extra layer of protection is that your CPU also can work in conjunction with the RAM, of course, to make it extra safe, of course, so there's no data corruption or data loss. Now, for the CPU itself, well, for AMD, it is the Ryzen and EPYC processors that support this. And I believe for Ryzen, it is not official, but it should still work. So even though it's not in any manuals from Ryzen, the ECC should work without any issues. Now for Intel, at the moment I believe only the Xeon processors support ECC, and maybe also now the latest generation of Intel processors, so Gen 12 I believe it is at the moment. That should also now support this, but of course do check for yourself in the specs of the processor itself if it is supported. Then a few other things to maybe keep in mind. If you are planning on using your home server as a NAS, so network attached storage, you might need multiple hard drives or multiple SSDs to keep all your data stored. So do check when you're purchasing like a power supply or a motherboard that it has enough connectors for these specific devices. So for the power supply, so the PSU, it is a SATA 12 or is it 15? I'm not sure. 12 or 15 15-pin power connector. So have a look at that. Pretty much all of them come with at least 3 or 4 connectors. But if you have more hard drives, do check that you have enough slots, of course, or enough connectors. And for the motherboard, do check that you have enough slots, so SATA connectors, to actually plug these in so you can actually access them. Now for the storage itself, I recommend that you purchase hard drives that are made for being, that are NAS specific, so that they are made to run 24/7. They are a bit more robust. They are made to run 24/7 and also to run very close to other hard drives, so spinning disks. They often have a little vibration, and this can over the long term cause issues. But with NAS specific drives, they are a bit better built, so that shouldn't be an issue then. Now if your motherboard doesn't have enough SATA connectors, an alternative is to get a SAS HBA card, flash to IT mode. I'm not really going to go in too much detail, so if you're interested in it, do your own research for that. Another option is of course to just purchase an expansion card within your PCIe slot with SATA connectors on them. That's also an alternative. Then for the motherboard itself, there are a few things that you need to look for, and also a few things that we might need to enable within the BIOS of the motherboard itself. So one thing that the motherboard needs to support, and something that pretty much I believe every processor should now support, is virtualization. So since we are going to use